All right, we are now live. Thank you to those online, and thank you for my faithful few that are here. Another wonderful day. The sun is out. I can smile, even though it's cold, at least in the mornings. It's nice now that the sun is...
Nice out in the sun, it's nice.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of nice there, but like first thing in the morning, you walk out the door and you're thinking, it's going to be a good day. So I am almost done with this up and down weather, but that's just me. So I've been telling you for a few weeks that like new C.S. Lewis information is just few and far between. You don't really find anything new. And then God must have listened to all my complaining, because when I did a quick Google search, an article from April 20th popped up. Unknown C.S. Lewis poem on whiskey and warm blankets discovered.
Unknown C.S. Lewis what?
Poem.
I didn't
Poem.
realize he was a poet.
It says, a previously unknown poem by C.S. Lewis in which he finds inspiration in whiskey, warm blankets, and the Anglo-Saxon epic Beowulf has been discovered. It was a thank you poem from one medievalist to another who would have understood the language and the allusions to Beowulf through the style in which the verse epic was written and its meter. He wrote the poem after visiting the Manchester home of Dr. Ida Lillian Gordon, a specialist in medieval English and Old Norse, and her husband, Eric Valentine Gordon, a professor of the English language. Just for fun, I'll read it to you. Now it's in English here, not Old English, because I have not seen Old English. I had an English teacher in high school that for fun brought in, I think it was even Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and like Old English.
When that I proud with this.
Yeah, gave us the handwritten part and then played it on a record, and we were all like, I don't know what it says, so. But this is in English. Let's try it this way.
I remember Jabberwocky.
Hail, O hostess whose heart knows not. The temper of Prib talk was kindly, wedded with whiskey, the white blanket. Winter's weaving worked about us, till the house was hushed, the hearth brighter. And bedtime better, in billowy nest, the stranger stretched, stove beside him. Blessed, blanket warm, blithely slumbered, through noiseless night. Noble weaver of people's peace, your poor servant. Not Wilk by name, on bended knee, gives you gramercy for guest friendship. Those wacky Old English poets. Yes, Nat Wilk was a pen name he used when writing these ancient Anglo-Saxon. Nat, N-A-T, and then W-H-I-L-K. But this was, it says the letter was kept by the Gordons, then by their daughter, until she sold the collection of letters and different manuscripts that are now at Leeds. So this has been hidden from the public eye. Nobody except the Gordons had seen this literary work by Lewis.
Where was the reference to whiskey in it?
Sometimes a banana is just a banana, and sometimes whiskey is just whiskey. I think what it is he was just saying they were visiting and spent the evening with good drink and warm blankets and had fun and enjoyed himself. So anyway, that's sort of a weird little, I'm like, nothing new ever pops up about C.S. Lewis, and then I'm like, bam, a new letter has been discovered. I was like, okay, so this is God's way of saying, I'll get you through these last 2 weeks. I'll find you something new, just to make it done. So I thought that's interesting. I don't know.
Did you Google that? Could I Google C.S. Lewis and find that?
Yeah, I actually just Googled C.S. Lewis news. News, and then it just pops up, and it's if you write down, it's in the Telegraph. It's an English paper. Although this particular article popped up, I think the Telegraph, you have to sign up for an account. This one popped up in like Yahoo News or something, so I was able to read it. But, oh, that's interesting. I did not know I gave him anything that made noise, but that's okay.
It's not real loud.
I tried to leave things quiet and soft and squishy over there for him today. So that was amusing. I just recently bought, and God knows when I'll have time to read it, a book of correspondence of J.R.R. Tolkien. They've just put out a volume of his letters, and I mean the book is that thick of all his writings, but it's interesting just to see behind these guys, their lives. We tend to think of their lives as the books that they've written, but then it's like they also had these lives outside of them as well, and it's just interesting to get into that sort of stuff, or it is to me. When I had a life, it was interesting. I'm not sure now. I know more about Bluey and Sesame Street than I do about most of my favorite authors, but that's okay.
The life of a stay-at-home parent.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. So anyway, why don't we open up with a word of prayer, and then we will get into chapter 10. And this chapter, I don't know if this chapter actually started this pet peeve of mine, or I bring it up sometimes and the example is lost on people, but I love this. Nice people or new men? What is God here to accomplish? And he gets into that in this chapter, and I've brought it up with some people, and sometimes they just can't see the difference. But it's like, something to think about. All right, let's pray. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for bringing us together, and thank you for watching over those who aren't here today. We ask that you bless them in their travels, keep them all safe. Let whatever they're doing be successful. Let them have enjoyment. Let them have relaxation. As for us, Father, just bless us in this conversation and in this fellowship. Give us wisdom and show us your mercy and your love for us as we talk through this topic today. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So on your sheets, I point out two sections of Scripture that I think kind of talk to the topic that he's talking about here. The first one being in Luke 6, starting with verse 43. For no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from the bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. That was one lesson. The other one in John 15, Jesus talking about himself. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Obviously, Lewis is thinking about these as he gets into this chapter. So, the light for the blind continues. He often asks for cookies now, even though we don't have any here. But he'll say, cookie, cookie. No cookies, dude.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah. Sorry. All right, chapter 10, nice people or new men? He meant what he said. Those who put themselves in his hands will become perfect as he is perfect. Perfect in love, wisdom, joy, beauty, and immortality. The change will not be completed in this life, for death is an important part of the treatment. How far the change will have gone before death in any particular Christian is uncertain. I think this is the right moment to consider a question which is often asked. If Christianity is true, why are not all Christians obviously nicer than all non-Christians? What lies behind that question is partly something very reasonable, and partly something that is not reasonable at all. The reasonable part is this: if conversion to Christianity makes no improvement in a man's outward actions, if he continues to be just as snobbish or spiteful or envious or ambitious as he was before, then I think we must suspect that his conversion was largely imaginary. And after one's original conversion, every time one thinks one is made in advance, that is the test to apply. Fine feelings, new insights, greater interest in religion mean nothing unless they make our actual behavior better. Just as in an illness, feeling better is not much good if the thermometer shows that your temperature is still going up. In that sense, the outer world is quite right to judge Christianity by its results. Christ told us to judge by results. A tree is known by its fruit, or as we say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. When we Christians behave badly or fail to behave well, we are making Christianity unbelievable to the outside world. The wartime posters told us that careless talk cost lives. It is equally true that careless lives cost talk. Our careless lives set the outer world talking, and we give them grounds for talking in a way that throws doubt on the truth of Christianity itself. But there is another way of demanding results in which the outer world may be quite illogical. They may demand not merely that each man's life should improve if he becomes a Christian. They may also demand, before they believe in Christianity, that they should see the whole world neatly divided into two camps, Christian and non-Christian, and that all the people in the first camp at any given moment should be obviously nicer than all the people in the second. This is unreasonable on several grounds. 1. In the first place, the situation in the actual world is much more complicated than that. The world does not consist of 100%. Christians, percent, that's not an actual period. Let's try that again. Threw me. The world does not consist of 100% Christians and 100% non-Christians. There are people, a great many of them, who are slowly ceasing to be Christians, but who still call themselves by that name. Some of them are clergymen. There are other people who are slowly becoming Christians, though they do not yet call themselves so. There are people who do not accept the full Christian doctrine about Christ, but who are so strongly attracted by him that they are his in a much deeper sense than they themselves understand. There are people in other religions who are being led by God's secret influence to concentrate on those parts of their religion which are in agreement with Christianity, and who thus belong to Christ without knowing it. For example, a Buddhist of goodwill may be led to concentrate more and more on the Buddhist teaching about mercy, and to leave in the background, though he might still say he believed, the Buddhist teaching on certain other points. Many of the good pagans long before Christ's birth may have been in this position. And always, of course, there are a great many people who are just confused in mind and have a lot of inconsistent beliefs all jumbled together. Consequently, it is not much use trying to make judgments about Christians and non-Christians in the mass. It is some use comparing cats and dogs, or even men and women in the Mass, because there one definitely knows which is which. Also, an animal does not turn either slowly or suddenly from a dog into a cat. But when we are comparing Christians in general with non-Christians in general, we are usually not thinking about real people whom we know at all, but only about two vague ideas which we have got from novels and newspapers. If you want to compare the bad Christian and the good atheist, you must think about two real specimens whom you have actually met. Otherwise, we come down to brass tacks in that way. We shall only be wasting time. 2, suppose we have come down to brass tacks and are now talking not about an imaginary Christian and an imaginary non-Christian, but about two real people in our own neighborhood. Even then, we must be careful to ask the right question. If Christianity is true, then it ought to follow, A, that any Christian will be nicer than the same person would be if he were not Christian. B, that any man who becomes a Christian will be nicer than he was before. Just in the same way, if the advertisement of White Smiles toothpaste are true, it ought to follow, A, that anyone who uses it will have better teeth than the same person would have if he did not use it. B, that if anyone begins to use it, his teeth will improve. But to point out that I, who use White Smiles, and also have inherited bad teeth from both my parents, have not got as fine a set as some healthy young Negro who never used any toothpaste at all, does not by itself prove that the advertisements are untrue. Christian Miss Bates may have an unkinder tongue than unbelieving Dick Firkin. That by itself does not tell us whether Christianity works. The question is what Miss Bates' tongue would be like if she were not a Christian, and what Dick's would be like if he became one. Miss Bates and Dick, as a result of natural causes and early upbringing, have certain temperaments. Christianity professes to put both temperaments under a new management if they will allow it to do so. What you have a right to ask is whether the management, if allowed to take over, improves the concern. Everyone knows that what is being managed in Dick Firkin's case is much nicer than what is being managed in Miss Bates. That is not the point. To judge the management of a factory, you must consider not only the output of the plant. Considering the plant at Factory A, it may be a wonder that it turns out anything at all. Considering the first-class outfit at Factory B, its output, though high, may be a great deal lower than it ought to be. No doubt the good manager at Factory A is going to put in new machinery as soon as he can, but that takes time. In the meantime, low output does not prove that he is a failure. 3. And now let us go a little deeper. The manager is going to put in new machinery. Before Christ has finished with Miss Bates, she is going to be very nice indeed. But if we left it at that, it would sound as though Christ's only aim was to pull Miss Bates up to the same level on which Dick had been all along. We have been talking, in fact, as if Dick were all right, as if Christianity was something nasty people needed and nice ones could afford to do without, and as if niceness was all that God demanded. But this would be a fatal mistake. The truth is that in God's eyes, Dick Firkin needs saving every bit as much as Miss Bates. In one sense, I will explain what sense in a moment, niceness hardly comes into the question. You cannot expect God to look at Dick's placid temper and friendly disposition exactly as we do. They result from natural causes which God himself creates. Being merely temperamental, they will all disappear if Dick's digestion alters. The niceness, in fact, is God's gift to Dick, not Dick's gift to God. In the same way, God has allowed natural causes, working in a world spoiled by centuries of sin, to produce in Miss Bates the narrow mind and jangled nerves which account for most of her nastiness. He intends, in his own good time, to set that part of her right. But that is not, for God, the critical part of the business. It presents no difficulties. It is not what he is anxious about. What he is watching and waiting and working for is something that is not easy even for God, because, from the nature of the case, even he cannot produce it by a mere act of power. He is waiting and watching for it both in Miss Bates and in Dick Firkin. It is something they can freely give him or freely refuse him. Will they or will they not turn to him and thus fulfill the only purpose for which they were created? Their free will is trembling inside them like the needle of a compass. But this is a needle that can choose. It can point to its true north, but it need not. Will the needle swing round and settle and point to God? He can help it to do so. He cannot force it. He cannot, so to speak, put out his own hand and pull it into the right position, for then it would not be free will anymore. Will it point north? That is the question on which all hangs. Will Miss Bates and Dick offer their natures to God? The question whether the natures they offer or withhold are, at that moment, nice or nasty ones, is of second importance. God can see to that part of the problem. Do not misunderstand me. Of course, God regards a nasty nature as a bad and deplorable thing. And of course, he regards a nice nature as a good thing, good like bread or sunshine or water. But these are good things which he gives and we receive. He created Dick's sound nerves and good digestion, and there is plenty more where they came from. It costs God nothing, so far as we know, to create nice things. But to convert rebellious wills cost his crucifixion. And because they are wills, they can, in nice people just as much as in nasty ones, refuse his request. And then, because that niceness in Dick was merely part of nature, it will all go to pieces in the end. Nature herself will all pass away. Natural causes come together in Dick to make a pleasant psychological pattern, just as they come together in a sunset to make a pleasant pattern of colors. Presently, for that is how nature works, they will fall apart again, and the pattern in both cases will disappear. Dick has had the chance to turn, or rather to allow God to turn, that momentary pattern into the beauty of an eternal spirit, and he has not taken it. There is a paradox here. As long as Dick does not turn to God, he thinks his niceness is his own. And just as long as he thinks that, it is not his own. It is when Dick realizes that his niceness is not his own, but a gift from God, and when he offers it back to God, it is just then that it begins to be really his own. For now, Dick is beginning to take a share in his own creation. The only things we can keep are the things we freely give to God. What we try to keep for ourselves is just what we are sure to lose. We must, therefore, not be surprised if we find among the Christians some people who are still nasty. There is even, when you come to think it over, a reason why nasty people might be expected to turn to Christ in greater numbers than nice ones. That was what people objected to about Christ during his life on earth. He seemed to attract such awful people. That is what people still object to and always will. Do you not see why? Christ said, "Blessed are the poor," and how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom. And no doubt he primarily meant the economically rich and economically poor. But do not his words also apply to another kind of riches and poverty? One of the dangers of having a lot of money is you might be quite satisfied with the kinds of happiness money can give, and so to fail to realize your need for God. If everything seems to come simply by signing checks, you may forget that you are at every moment totally dependent on God. Now, quite plainly, natural gifts carry with them a similar danger. If you have sound nerves and intelligence and health and popularity and a good upbringing, you are likely to be quite satisfied with your character as it is. Why drag God into it, you may ask? A certain level of good conduct comes fairly easily to you. You are not one of those wretched creatures who are always being tripped up by sex or dipsomania or nervousness or bad temper. Everyone says you are a nice chap, and between ourselves, you agree with them. You are quite likely to believe that all this niceness is your own doing, and you may easily not feel the need for any better kind of goodness. Often, people who have all these natural kinds of goodness cannot be brought to recognize their need for Christ at all until, one day, the natural goodness lets them down, and their self-satisfaction is shattered. In other words, it is hard for those who are rich, in this sense, to enter the kingdom. It is very different for the nasty people, the little, low, timid, warped, thin-blood, lonely people, or the passionate, sensual, unbalanced people. If they make any attempt at goodness at all, they learn in double-quick time that they need help. It is Christ or nothing for them. It is taking up the cross and following, or else despair. They are the lost sheep. He came specifically to find them. They are, in one very real and terrible sense, the poor. He blessed them. They are the awful set he goes about with. And of course, the Pharisees still say, as they said from the first, if there were anything in Christianity, those people would not be Christians. There is either a warning or an encouragement here for every one of us. If you are a nice person, if virtue comes easily to you, beware. Much is expected from those to whom much is given. If you mistake for your own merits what are really God's gift to you through nature, and if you are contented with simply being nice, you are still a rebel, and all those gifts will only make your fall more terrible, your corruption more complicated, your bad example more disastrous. The devil was an archangel once. His natural gifts were as far above yours as yours are above those of a chimpanzee. But if you are a poor creature, poisoned by a wretched upbringing in some house full of vulgar jealousies and senseless quarrels, saddled by no choice of your own with some loathsome sexual perversion, nagged day in and day out by an inferiority complex that make you snap at your best friends, do not despair. He knows all about it. You are one of the poor whom he blessed. He knows what a wretched machine you are trying to drive. Keep on. Do what you can. One day, perhaps in another world, but perhaps far sooner than that, he will fling it on the scrap heap and give you a new one. And then you may astonish us all, not least yourself, for you have learned your driving in a hard school. Some of the last will be first, and some of the first will be last. Niceness, wholesome, integrated personality is an excellent thing. We must try by every medical, educational, economic, and political means in our power to produce a world where as many people as possible grow up nice, just as we must try to produce a world where all have plenty to eat. But we must not suppose that even if we succeeded in making everyone nice, we should have saved their souls. A world of nice people, content in their own niceness, looking no further, turned away from God, would be just as desperately in need of salvation as a miserable world, and might even be more difficult to save. For mere improvement is not redemption, though redemption always improves people even here and now, and will, in the end, improve them to a degree we cannot yet imagine. God became man to turn creatures into sons, not simply to produce better men of the old kind, but to produce a new kind of man. It is not like teaching a horse to jump better and better, but like turning a horse into a winged creature. Of course, once it has got its wings, it will soar over fences which could never have been jumped, and thus beat the natural horse at its own game. But there may be a period while the wings are just beginning to grow when it cannot do so, and at that stage the lumps on its shoulders, no one could tell by looking at them that they are going to be wings, may even give it an awkward appearance. But perhaps we have already spent too long on this question. If what you want is an argument against Christianity, and I well remember how eagerly I looked for such an argument when I began to be afraid it was true, you can easily find some stupid and unsatisfactory Christian and say, "So, there's your boasted new man. Give me the old kind." But if once you have begun to see that Christianity is on other grounds probable, you will know in your heart that this is only evading the issue. What can you ever really know of other people's souls, of their temptations, their opportunities, and their struggles? One soul in the whole creation you do know, and it is the only one whose fate is placed in your hands. If there is a God, you are in a sense alone with him. You cannot put him off with speculations about your next-door neighbors or memories of what you have read in books. What will all that chatter and hearsay count? Will you even be able to remember it? When the anesthetic fog, which we call nature or the real world, fades away, and the presence in which you have always stood becomes palpable, immediate, and unavoidable. He had a lot to say in this one. I do not know what my son has been ripping up over there, but every time I sort of hesitated as I was ripping, it was or reading, it was the sound of something ripping. So God bless him with paper. It just anything paper. Oh, child. All right. Whew. That's a lot. So, start from the beginning. Should conversion to Christianity make an improvement in a man's outward actions?
Yes.
Yeah. But, so explain that. Yes, it should. So everything changes right away?
Not
You
necessarily.
notice it should, you didn't say would.
Okay, I'll give you that one. It should. Yeah, I mean, people will change, but, oh, the things you got to overcome. Now, what did Christ tell us we're supposed to judge people by? Results. Fruits. Fruits. We got into that. So, yeah, you're sort of expecting to see. If someone is saying they're a Christian, you're expecting to see something that tells us, ooh, okay, yeah, I kind of get that. You know, we're told to look for those fruits. Now, he gets into this argument. This argument gets a little long and engaged, but he talks about, you know, before a person commits to becoming a Christian, they expect to see fruit in the life of a believer. Okay, I think we all sort of agree on that. In addition to this, what else do they demand to see? What does somebody, you know, when they say, like, I'm going to become a believer, what did they, he said they kind of want to see something, or a way they view the world.
You know, I think they compare the life within the church to the life outside the church.
Yeah, they begin this.
You know, I think that's reasonable. I think you should see something.
Yep, but they, you know, and the way he described it is they kind of split the world into two camps: Christian, non-Christian. It's like, and if I'm a Christian, then everything's going to be perfect and wonderful and A-okay, and if you're a non-Christian, you know, that's you know, and he's starting with sort of this basic, you know, it's not where we end up, but we start with this sort of basic kind of attitude, and people who are exploring, people who are thinking, people, Okay, and we're going to use some of that language. That tends to be more evangelical language, exploring the faith, or you're looking. From a Lutheran point of view, we might say the Spirit is drawing them, is pulling them, because it's sort of a different way of talking about the same event. Lewis even sort of points at it. God is pulling, God is calling, God is saying, come here. And really it's up to man to go, nope, to push away, to not let God. So, I don't want to get too lost in the language here. Evangelicals will read this and be like, yep, I got to choose and make a decision. All the Lutherans in the room will be like, yeah. But it's sort of talking about the same process, just a little differently.
Free will is in saying no.
Yeah, basically. And it's not quite so free. The easy thing is to say no. The body wants to say no. But, here is this person thinking about God, being drawn to God, and they're saying, well, then the world, is made up of Christians and non-Christians. Christians are these good people and everything's wonderful. Non-Christians are bad people and they're evil and all that. And then he says, why is this sort of thinking unreasonable? And he gets into 3 arguments.
Well, you gotta compare apples to apples.
Yep.
If you got a cranky old man, you gotta compare him with another cranky old
Cranky
man.
old man. It's funny you went right to the cranky old man example
Well, I
here.
have an
Paul.
experience.
Yeah, so that, and actually what you're getting at is sort of part 2 of his argument. Part 1, simple enough. He said the world is more complicated. To just put people into buckets, thump. Too simple. The world doesn't work that way. Second thing is he says, all right, when you get down to talking about them, it's basically kind of what you said, little differently, but often when you get into arguments with people, discussions, we'll call them discussions with people, and you talk about good Christians, bad Christians, good atheists, bad atheists, all these people, oftentimes we're talking about them way up here. And he's saying that's sort of silly. You can kind of create any straw man you want within that system. You're going to talk about the cranky old man, think of the cranky old man. You can't even begin to do any sort of discussion until you talk about person A, person B. And he gave them, in his book, he gave them names. It was Miss Bates, because apparently he could not talk about a young woman by her first name, and Dick something, but he kept referring to him as Dick in there. Firkin.
Yes, Dick.
Yeah, I don't know where those names came from. Maybe I could have looked it up, but it's sort of silly. So in his mind, what he's saying is, okay, we're no longer really talking about Christianity's effect on generic person A and generic person B. We want to talk about Christianity's effect on you. To use a very Lutheran term, what Christ has done for you, not for hypothetical you, but for you. And then the third point, he says, they've got this discussion about the Christian, the non-Christian. You're still thinking about it in the hypothetical. He said there's this idea that you're thinking that things aren't going to change. He used this example of the factories, and you've got factory A that's turning out some product, but it's an old thing and it's barely going. You got factory B turning out some very nice product, but maybe not as much as it could. And he said the whole thing you don't understand, the owner's putting in new machinery. You can't talk about them based on just what you see. You have to talk about them understanding who they are and what they're built of, and who the people are that run the thing. It's okay. He's not going to tear down the church over there. That was a call to my son as he's grabbing banners. So kind of those 3 points, basically saying you got to get out of the hypothetical. Hypothetical really doesn't do you a lot of good. The question when you're talking is, what is the impact on you? And so, fine, we acknowledge, because we're realists, there are nice atheists out there. There are nice people of other religion out there. They're nice. There are some miserable bastards within Christianity. Pretty sure that doesn't get you thrown
How
off.
come you looked at me when you said that?
We're just talking. We're just talking. But, you know, I mean, we can acknowledge the reality of those situations. Now, this I thought was most interesting because I don't know that I had ever really thought about this before. But, you know, he said, what does it cost? What does it cost God to create any nice thing, nice person, a person with a nice temperament, a good upbringing? What did it cost God? I mean, he just made, he created. You know, that niceness, that part that you think is so important, the thing that you think, you know, coffee, God's drink is what I refer to it as, but coffee every morning. What did it cost God to create it? Nothing. He
I
put
never thought about it costing God.
he put together creation. He just made it.
Yeah.
Now, to save you, to convert the you that is rebellious, to convert the you that is destined for hell, what did that cost God?
Everything. Son.
Required crucifixion, required sacrifice, required his blood, required him coming to earth and dying to bring you to him. That's a little different than being nice. So,
Well, the argument here is that it's about free will, right?
the argument here is about free will. The argument is, well, at this point, the question is, when you think about these things, the niceness, the things you have, the qualities that are in you, what did those cost God? It cost him nothing. He created. You're part of families. You're part of countries. You're there. It did not cost him. He created. He created a sun that gave you nice weather. But in order to make you his child, what did it cost him?
Well, that's crucifixion.
That's the point. Absolutely. Everything. It cost him everything. It wasn't just like what it cost God to make today a nice day. In order to get your rebellious will in line with his, in order to make you a child of God, it is everything.
Okay, so that's the paragraph where he says, he can help it to do so, he cannot force it. He cannot, so to speak, put out his own hand and pull it into the right position, where then it would not be free will anymore. It's a strong
Yeah,
endorsement of free
so
will.
he really talks about it in terms of free will, which once again Lutherans are going to sit there and go,
Yeah, we agree with free will.
I mean, we do within the sense of we have the capacity to push away, but that's just a will that's bound to sin. We don't have free will in the sense of I can't wake up any day as a sinner and say, you know, today I'm going to choose God. I'm going to heaven today. Woohoo! That we can't do. But the point is that God is pulling us all the time. The free will comes in, are we going to hitch a ride? Or are we going to keep resisting him and pushing him back? C.S. Lewis kind of speaks the opposite way of like, can I choose to give this to God? I think as Lutherans, we would probably say, do we just acknowledge that we give up and give it to him as opposed to choosing?
If we're truly Christians.
I would say, yeah, as Christians, you know, that we are acknowledging that he's been pulling and we just give it to him. But Lewis puts it in a very, like I said, in very evangelical, I am choosing today to do this. That's Lewis's language. I'm just telling you, it's slightly different ways of describing the same thing. Part of the question is, where do you place the emphasis? On God's work or on your work?
I like the comparison of the Christian Miss Bates and the unbelieving Dick Firkin.
Yeah, that actually is quite helpful because what about this idea? He says there's a paradox. The only things we keep for ourselves are the things we freely give to God. You ever thought about that?
No, but it sounds right.
It sounds right. Well, this idea, so Dick Firkin, I'm just going to keep saying that name until it sounds comfortable in my head, but it doesn't. Dick Firkin, nicest guy in the world, helps you, car breaks down, comes and picks you up, takes you out, gets some food, does everything right, nice guy, but doesn't need anything to do with God. So what happens at the end of time, at the end of his life? What did Mr. Firkin's life wind up amounting to?
Nothing.
Nada.
It all goes to pieces in the end.
It goes away.
Nature.
Now, every single thing he had that put that niceness in him, that made it possible for him to have a good attitude, that made it, things that we say, that's just the way I am, he's a nice guy, he's friendly as hell, but where did that come from?
It all came from God.
Came from God. And Lewis's point is, unless you give those things back to God, now does that mean you stop being nice?
No.
No. But in faith, you acknowledge what God has done for you.
You use them for the things that God expected you to use them.
And yeah, and the point is that if you do that, those things will be amplified. Those things will be increased. Those things will be made perfect. It all goes back to the beginning of the chapter where he said, when God said, I'm going to make you perfect, be perfect as I am perfect. And we're all like, I'm not perfect. I'm never perfect. He's like, no, you're going to be perfect. All those nice things, if they are there in faith, they're going to be made perfect in eternity. But if they're not there in faith, then when you're done, they're done. It's not a happy thought. It's not even an easy thought. And he kind of gets into this a little bit. Boom, 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 boom. I'll let it go down a little, and then we'll talk about that. Here's a great one, because we don't like this. Why might nasty people be expected to turn to Christ in greater numbers than nice ones?
Well, it'd be like if we, instead of the nasty person, we make it the poor person would be more likely.
Sure.
Because what do they have to lose? Rich man, give away all your wealth.
Or just acknowledge that your wealth didn't come from you.
Poor
Or
miserable sinner.
yeah,
I don't
no
know if they're expected to turn to Christ, though. You hope they would.
expected.
Yeah, it
Who?
says, why might nasty people be expected to turn to Christ
Well, so
in greater
See your
numbers than-
need.
I
so
don't know.
I'm
I
not
don't know.
perfect.
If you're miserable, you want something to help.
you want something
But I
that
mean nasty people, not maybe we should define nasty. Nasty to me is like criminals,
you don't
people
go
who
too
steal
far.
your identity, people who are. that's
well, we're all
nasty.
nasty
Yeah,
people
but if
the one
you're,
way.
if you're nasty, eventually that gets to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So then you want something to help.
Conscience.
well,
bothers you.
hopefully, but I don't think they all do.
Not always, but nice people. I mean, when you talk about starting mission startups and going places, where's the first place everybody wants to go?
Inner city.
Some place where they think folks are doing worse than them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
You don't want to give to somebody that has more than you.
well, you certainly don't want to do that. Yeah, but I mean, think
Yeah,
about
I
it.
mean,
Churches
isn't that
churches
true?
have a hard time. Every time we've talked about doing mission outreach around here, where's the first place everybody talks about?
City mission,
You know,
Well, there's city
Deer
mission.
Path or-
Deer Path.
yeah.
yeah.
Got a whole subdivision right here.
You're not talking about.
Nobody's
White-
ever talked about
We're not
going
gonna
back
make
behind
a-
us.
We actually
We're not
did
gonna
that.
go over to White
Yeah.
House.
And we didn't do that one.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, why the lower income area and not our peers?
They're going to hell too if they don't know
Yeah, our peers are going to hell too. We should put that on our advertising. It's, you could be going to hell, ask us more. I'm not saying it's not right, I'm just saying I don't think the advertising goes.
They're more
But
inclined to
that's,
sue ya.
that's exactly what Lewis is talking about here when we talk about why do you expect nasty people or poorer people or however you want to sort of frame that in your head. Why would you expect them to turn to Christ more than the others? And we all sort of naturally seem to do that. I'm not saying it's good.
It's because those who are comfortable off think they've earned it and done it all themselves, and they just don't need.
Absolutely, absolutely. That
You have
is,
the perfect life, how are you gonna
Let's
change
say
it for the
struggling instead of nasty.
yeah,
Those who are
struggling. Fine. But that's exactly Lewis's point, is that, you know, we all tend to think we're looking that way, but every one of us needs to come to Christ, and we need to talk with all of them. So we might look at somebody and think, wow, they're a nice guy, wow, they're doing good. You know, you don't often find new church startups among your peers. You often find them going, oh, Bubba.
It's just harder to talk to someone who's very comfortable.
Yes. Why don't you have your diaper on?
Oh.
All right.
I think class is over.
I think class is about over, so thank you everybody for tuning in. I currently have a little boy with no diaper on over there, so I will head over that way. God bless. Everybody have a good end of the week. And we will come back next week to wrap up.
Yes.
Pastor Kroll never had this happen during class. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Hey, dude. Hey, dude. What's going on? Hold on. What you doing? Did you just get bored? What you doing?
Maybe he wants to be potty trained.
All right, your diaper's clean. Were you just trying to take off your pants? The is clean. Hey, why did you rip up your Bluey book? What's going on, sir? Hey, why'd you rip up the Bluey book? That's what I heard tearing.
It's almost 2:30 anyway.
Oh, sorry, folks. We were just getting to the interesting parts of the discussion. What's wrong? I'll tell you what. Let's get. I have some applesauce over there. You want some applesauce? Could you be hungry? Didn't think you were hungry. Sorry.
There might be some goldfish